Ew, gotta get rid of this old Backstreet Boys t-shirt.
Tell me why.
Because it stinks, boys.
Tell me why.
I've washed it so many times, but the odor won't come out.
Tell me why.
No, you tell me why I can't get rid of this odor.
Have you tried Downy Rinse and Refresh? It doesn't just cover up odors, it helps remove them.
Wow, it worked, guys.
Yeah.
Downy Rinse and Refresh removes more odor in one wash than the leading value detergent in 3 washes. Find it wherever you buy laundry products.
Why don't more infant formula companies use organic, grass-fed whole milk instead of skim? Why don't more infant formula companies use the latest breast milk science? Why don't more infant formula companies run their own clinical trials? Why don't more infant formula companies use more of the proteins found in breast milk? Why don't more infant formula companies have their own factories instead of outsourcing their manufacturing? We wondered the same thing. So we made ByHeart, a better formula for formula. Learn more at byheart.com.
This is a More Than Just Podcast production.
Welcome to Spotcast, Season 4, Episode 5. My name is Tim Mitra. I am in Toronto, Ontario, and I'm joined once again by Jonathan Kuhlein in Woodstock, New Brunswick.
Whoa, greetings from Woodstock, New Brunswick.
Down south in Woodstock. And up north in, you are up north. Up north in Seattle, Washington, we have Jaime Lopez Jr.
How's it going?
Alrighty. Going good. Thanks for asking. Alrighty. So we have, I don't know if I'd listened to the entire episode. I probably did several times, but last time we were on, we were talking about Black Widow and other things on the show. And we were talking about Scarlett Johansson, who happens to be married to Colin Jost from Saturday Night Live. I think he's a head writer there, or one of the two head writers. But interesting little factoid. I think we joked about, or we mentioned them on the show, but apparently he refused to run lines with his wife, Scarlett Johansson, because he didn't want to be spoiled by the movie. How's that?
Sounds sensible to me.
Yeah, well, from a BATNA analysis, so that BATNA is the acronym for Best Alternative to Negotiated Agreement. Colin Jost, pretty decent looking guy, but it's Scarlett Johansson, bro. Like, she wants you to do the dishes, you do the dishes. She wants you to run lines, you run the lines. Because, I wish them well in their marriage, but should they separate, I'm like, who's going to end up in a better situation? It's like, I think he will have a difficult time ascending this mountain again.
Yeah. Colin Jost is done well by the SNL money, but it's not quite Marvel money. And also, It's Scarlett Johansson.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's like, you're not Brad Pitt, bro. Like, there's no backups for you that are going to meet this high. So, buy her some flowers.
I believe she's pregnant right now with his baby.
Oh, there you go. See, he had it all planned out. He was like, locking him in.
Yeah.
Right. For what good that does. Alrighty, let's dig into the headlines. So, we have Jaime going at bat first with HBO.
Yeah, and these two, I'm going to kind of merge into one story here, because the first one, I think they're related. So the first one is HBO Max will release 10 Warner Brothers films straight to streaming in 2022. So for those of you who don't remember what happened for 2021 because of the pandemic, Warner Brothers said, you know what? We don't know what's going to actually release to theaters, so let's just go all in on streaming for the 2021 calendar year and say everything is going to be for sure on streaming same day if it releases in theaters, or it might be just streaming only, right? That's how they sort of navigated the waters. The question was, what are they going to do in 2022? Hopefully things start opening up again properly as the pandemic hopefully starts winding down, is the thinking. So they're saying here they're going to release 10 films straight to streaming. However, they don't specify which ones those are. And it could be because the next story linked to this is AMC movie theaters and Warner Brothers have agreed to take movies exclusive to theaters for 45 days. So will not be simultaneous releases, or at least some of these. So the question becomes, wait, how do these two stories work together? And I think your marquee titles are probably going to be exclusive to theaters for 45 days in 2022. And then your sort of lesser known or less likely to be big budget sort of movies probably end up on HBO Max for that 10 films. That's how I think it'll work out.
Yeah, it doesn't make sense to have. I mean, I don't think we're talking about Batman and big blockbuster films here. I think we're talking those ones are going to be in the theaters because that's where the money's really made at this point.
Yeah.
So do you know, Jonathan, if the theater in Woodstock is open right now, or?
I do not know if it's here, although Woodstock, New Brunswick writ large, they've already lifted like indoor mask mandates and everything else. So I don't see why anything, like so far nothing is closed. Like
really?
Everything is available. You can go into a lot of places without a mask on. Some businesses have chosen to still do it, but across the province there's no rule that says you have to wear a mask in places. It's feeling very American here. It's interesting. We still, for what it's worth, my direct family are still wearing masks when we go out.
Sure.
But yeah, it's definitely a lot looser here than it is in the Toronto area for sure.
Yeah, and the whole misconception about wearing masks, it's not to protect you. It's like you're allowed to walk around with the safety off on your gun. Is basically what you're saying, right?
Yeah.
Oops, sorry, I shot you. Didn't mean to do that.
I appreciate the translation there for the American audience. So we can understand
safety is an important feature on a gun that you may not know about, American fans.
Yeah, exactly. It's an option. It's like indicators when you're turning lanes, right? You don't have to use them. There's no law that says you have to, and it doesn't impinge on your freedom to use them either. So
I wanted to pick up this story as well, just quickly, Jaime. I wanted to ask you. So this story made me wonder two things. One, I wanted to ask you. So is Suicide Squad available to you on HBO Max now?
Yes, I saw it, maybe not same day, but I definitely saw it that weekend that it came out.
Yeah, because here it seems to be exclusive to the movie theaters, because I haven't seen it show up on any of my platforms to stream. Maybe I'm not looking in the right spot, but I haven't seen it available. And that's the sort of first time I think I've seen that happen. And beyond that, I was thinking about Shang-Chi, which is opening in 3 weeks. The situation in New Brunswick might be bright and rosy right now because it's pretty optimistic, but back in the Toronto area there's been a climb in Delta variant cases, and I wonder if Disney Marvel hasn't said anything yet about doing a same day Disney Plus release. They say it's an exclusive to theaters, but I wonder if we're going to see that move as we start talking about these, whether or not the day and date TV purchase streaming, whether it's free on something like your subscription to HBO Max, or whether you pay the $30 premium on Disney Plus. I wonder if we're going to hear news about that in the next week or two.
Yeah, that's a good point, because I think the Suicide Squad's box office was pretty disappointing, but my guess is that's not based on quality. That's based on, is it the sort of film that you're willing to go brave the world such as it is for? And I think Black Widow did actually pretty good with that respect. It's kind of a marquee title. Yeah. The Suicide Squad, I don't know that it has quite the brand cachet of the Marvel Cinematic Universe in general, and it's they're kind of a weirdo property. This isn't Batman, this isn't Superman or Wonder Woman kind of thing.
Yeah, I just double checked on Apple to see if the iTunes Store had it. It's not available here in Canada to stream the Suicide Squad. So unless it's available through some other service that I'm not aware of, I think your choices are go to the theater or don't watch it, which is disappointing. I got to be honest. I mean, I obviously, Jaime, I hope we'll get a little bit of a teaser review from you later in the episode, but I was looking forward to see it. I think James Gunn is an interesting filmmaker. I thought, the fact that they were, adding all these characters and stuff, it looks like an interesting movie. I'd watch it. I might even pay $30 for it to watch it at home, especially because I can watch it with my son. It's disappointing that, even though things are, obviously loosening up a little bit, that they made the decision not to make it available.
All right. Well, let's move on to the Doctor news.
Yeah, so 2 stories here that are also kind of tied at the hip. So we learned that Doctor Who's 13th season is a single story. So I guess it's going to be a little bit more serialized and less episodic with an overall arc, is my understanding. It's not a lot of detail here. I don't know if it's going to be like, what if it's like 24? There's 13 hours and the Doctor has to take care of things. I don't know. That's just my speculation. But we also know that this will be the final season with Jodie Whittaker as the Doctor.
So the showrunner, Chris Chibnall, is moving on as well. And he had a really short run. I think there was a sort of a thought that he might be sort of
3 years. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that people thought maybe he'd be, in it for the long run, like the previous showrunner. But no, it's a complete turnover again.
Yeah. Well, I think we knew about Jodie Whittaker. We talked about that previously that this is the one thing, but it's interesting that they're going to try the one storyline arc on the Doctor. Kind of wonder how that'll play out, because most Doctor Who, like Star Trek, like the Star Trek original series anyway, or Star Trek, any TNG, I guess, have always sort of been like one, nicely tied up in a bow by the end of the episode, right? Occasionally you get two-parters.
Well, there was the one season of Matt Smith where they sorry, Jaime, but they bookmark it with the sort of the somebody kills the Doctor and then who is it mystery that sort of runs through the whole season, and then it gets finished up at the end of the season.
Oh, that's true. Yeah,
It wasn't the entire arc of this. Like it was the overarching arc of the season, but it wasn't every episode was necessarily strictly tied to that mystery. But it did sort of bookend the season, and it was sort of the underlying, well, how did that happen kind of mystery, right?
True. Yeah, I forgot about that one with the astronaut and all that stuff.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah. I think it was Matt Smith's last season too, right? Wasn't it?
I can't remember if it was. I think maybe it was his last but one. I think there was maybe one more after that. But
penultimate
it's been a while since I've watched it.
Penultimate season.
Yeah, that's right. The last but one's up there.
Yeah, and then what's the other one? I also like the way they dealt with Clara, or I wasn't sure if it was Clara or the TARDIS at the end with Capaldi, right? Where she ends up in the restaurant.
Yeah.
Wipes her memory. But is that the TARDIS manifested, or forget?
Yeah, again, I can't remember. It's been quite a while.
Because she's like the waitress, but she's wearing a blue dress with white, accents on it, meant to be the TARDIS. Mm-hmm. Anywho, all right, let's not spoil any more Doctor Who for Jaime and carry on. Oh, look, it's Jaime again.
Yeah, so we got the latest trailer for Ghostbusters Afterlife, which looks like
which Ghostbusters is this?
So this would be the third, if you follow the 1984 timeline.
Okay, so it's Bankler and...
No, so the idea is it's pickup from that storyline. So it's you're not really supposed to include the Kristen Wiig.
Yeah, no, I mean, but it's like, is it the old guys come back and?
Well, Jaime, I think maybe we'll get into that with us.
Yeah, yes-ish. So the basic concept that we know now is that the original Ghostbusters, they're presumably long retired. Harold Ramis's Egon Spengler character has died, and we know that he has grandchildren. And in this trailer, we learned that his wife, or at least the mother of the children, is Janine from the original Ghostbusters series, because she makes an appearance in this trailer. And the grandkids discover, something bad.
The gear, I guess.
Yeah, all the gear and stuff. They accidentally unleash some stuff from their house out in the middle of like the cornfields sort of thing. So I recommend watching the trailer. We also get a hint of Dan Aykroyd's Ray Stanza character, who answers the phone.
Stanza,
yeah, who answers the phone for his occult books store as he had in the original series.
I was also a little bit spoiled, and so therefore I will pass on the little bit of spoiling to you two, which was that there was some toy news that came out last week, and it included some of the action figures from the new movie. And 3 of the action figures are definitely 3 characters you'll remember from the first movie.
Right.
Yeah, right. So the trailer is interesting because it feels sort of like a mix of Ghostbusters 1984 and The Goonies, which I guess if you put those 2 movies together, you probably end up with Stranger Things, which kind of makes sense given that Flint Wolfhard, who's in that series, is also in this movie. So hopefully it's a fun tone.
Well, and it's a legacy thing too, because it's Jason Reitman doing the property based on that was co-created by Ivan Reitman, his dad, right?
Right. Yep.
Ivan Reitman, noted Canadian.
Yes, just another Torontonian. Yeah. So Jaime, you're up to the next one.
Yeah. Speaking of legacy, so the Hawkeye show coming out on Disney Plus gets a November 24th release date. That's where Hawkeye is apparently going to be, training up his daughter in some capacity to be heroic. So mark your calendars. November 24th.
Did he become sort of some ninja guy at some point? Or something different?
Yeah,
that was
so
an Endgame, right?
in Endgame, he had taken on a sort of a different character from the comic books. The character's name is Ronin, and that uniform that he was wearing, where he's sort of using the sword, and he has the big fight with the Yakuza in Japan, when Scarlett Johansson's Black Widow goes and finds him. So I wonder if this is a real sort of passing the torch kind of series, where he realizes he's no longer Hawkeye, and he's giving up the name, giving it to someone else. And that's something that definitely happened in the comic books. Speaking of release dates, I've got one here. So the Lord of the Rings series that's being produced for Amazon Prime has actually got a release date now. We know we're going to be getting it. We know we're going to be getting it in September 2022. So still another year away. But apparently they've actually committed to a timeline. Again, they can obviously bump that. But interesting. It'll be interesting to see how they do that adapted for television. Obviously not quite the big budget that Peter Jackson had for his films, but they also announced this week, and just a little side addition to this one, that they are moving the production out of New Zealand and to England.
Where?
England.
Oh, really?
Mm-hmm. So it'll be interesting to see what comes of that. If it, if they're just going to be doing all, CGI New Zealand backgrounds, or what they've got in mind. But yeah, an interesting move that they decided to pull it out and move it there. Next up, we've got an interesting story. Speaking of Scarlett Johansson and Disney Plus. So Scarlett Johansson is suing Disney over the Black Widow release that came on Disney Plus. So this has been a topic we've covered a little bit on this show, which is that, as these giant production companies like Disney have decided to move their properties onto the streaming services as opposed to actually releasing them just in the theaters, it certainly affects the bottom line. We talked about it with Wonder Woman 1985. What's it called? Wonder Woman?
1984.
84? Okay. Wonder Woman 1984, they apparently negotiated new deals for Gal Gadot and for the director, Patty Jenkins, because they were supposed to get a piece of the back-end release of it, and obviously that wasn't going to happen during COVID, but they wanted to get the movie out, so they basically gave them, several $1 million a piece in order to make good on that. Well, apparently Disney did not apparently choose that route with Scarlett Johansson, so what they've done is put it out in theaters in small amounts around the world, as is available during the pandemic, and then they put it out over Disney Plus, and there is no part of the contract that says anything about Disney Plus kicking some of that money back to Scarlett Johansson. She was supposed to get a piece of the box office. If it doesn't go into the box office, she's missing out on potentially millions and millions of dollars in revenue. So she's taking the stand that she's going to sue and try and get her money. It's an interesting case because obviously this is we're talking about something that could be a model going forward. Obviously it's something we've talked about on the show, whether or not these day and date releases are going to happen. Obviously going forward they can work that into the contract, but they're still dealing with the ramifications of signing all these contracts for all these big name Hollywood stars prior to the pandemic. So it's going to keep playing out like this. It's particularly notable that she isn't suing Marvel or Marvel Studios. She's suing Disney. So she's taking a stand. But it's also when you take the point of your career now, you could make the case that Black Widow, the film that just came out, is her last turn in the Marvel universe. Although obviously you could write her in different ways. In a comic book world, obviously any character is fair game. Nobody's really dead forever. There's lots of different things they can do. But if you're biting the hand that feeds you, if you're suing Disney, you'd have to think that burns a bridge or two too. So it's an interesting story. A lot of layers to it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I guess on one hand, you're like, hey, doesn't she understand there's a pandemic? But then again, I guess the deal was sort of inked before all this happened. And
well, and it's ugly too, because again, not only did Disney / Marvel Studios wait until this point to give her own starring film, which some might say is a little overdue, but then obviously this is the same kind of participation deal that they gave to, Robert Downey Jr. and to Chris Hemsworth and to, Chris Evans. So all of her co-workers, all of her co-stars have already had that big bite of the apple and have made, I mean, Robert Downey Jr. apparently made monstrous, like he got paid a good salary to be in the movies, but a monstrous amount of the back end on some of these movies. Theoretically hundreds of millions of dollars on some of them. Right. Whereas, now she's basically finally, after all this time, got her turn and isn't going to get what she's owed after all her participation and after all, that their character has brought to that mix of movies. It leaves a bit of a taste. And you're right, Tim. I think having a probably very wealthy performer complaining about not getting paid well enough during a global pandemic because the movie wasn't released properly because of the pandemic. The optics are a little bad, but I do kind of feel also kind of sorry for her, even though it does kind of have a little bit of a, I'm a spoiled rich person fighting for more. I still think she's got a real good point.
No, for sure. I mean, definitely, there's always the glass ceiling aspect of everything, and what's fair is fair and all that stuff, right? Like, I mean, the plan was, and the deal, the contract she made was not considered, like, there was no pandemic when she made the contract, right? And started filming and things like that, right? So, and then the pandemic just caused delays and also caused the change in the way it was distributed to us fans. I mean, we waited it was been in the can for over a year before we got to see it, right? So that, all that kind of unforeseen stuff happens, but you have to, I mean, again, there should also be insurances on the contract and that kind of stuff, so she doesn't have to sue them to get the money, But there you go, What can you do? What was that thing you talked about on BEFT or something like that earlier, Jaime? About negotiations and stuff?
BATNA, BATNA, Best Alternative to Negotiate Agreement, which is an interesting one to look here, where Disney's side, I would say, this character's dead, we brought her back for one last go-around. Yeah. We kind of don't need this actress anymore, right? Very easy to write without her coming back. From her side, it might be kind of the same thing of burn a bridge of my character's dead, I can't go any further. I kind of need to get the money while I can, and these guys owe me.
Yeah, well, and that's just it. I mean, she's now, from a practical point of view, they're not going to bring her back unless they reincarnate her or do a prologue, or what do you call this, prologue kind of thing. What do you call it when they do a
prequel? Yeah,
prequel
I
kind
think,
of deal.
Again, in a world where you can do the What If TV show, and you can do, all these different, multiverses and everything else, again, anything is fair game, but that is also to say they don't have to do anything. They can write you dead if they want to, and they could recast you if they want to. It's just, again, all of it seems a little distasteful. It's an uncomfortable thing across the board.
Mm-hmm. Interesting that she chose Disney as the vehicle to sue, right? Go for the big guys, I guess. All right, where are we in the list of stories? Blue Beetle. What?
Yeah, so Cobra Kai star, I think it's pronounced Solo Maridueña. He's the Miguel character from Cobra Kai, is cast as the Blue Beetle in an upcoming HBO Max film. So this is I believe the Blue Beetle that is a more recent iteration of it, where it's
with whom you share a name.
It's scary how close this character is meant to be me. This is why I zeroed in on this. So the character's name is Jaime Reyes, so really close, that's 50-50 connection. But the scary connection is he lives or is from El Paso, Texas, which is my hometown. I was like, man, this character is meant to be me.
If they give him high hair, I'd consider putting a suit in, just saying.
Right? Maybe they should cast me as old man Beetle, for the future or something.
Yeah. Or if he throws a Blue Steel look, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, I don't know. Have you guys watched Cobra Kai? I must admit, it's been on my to-do list, but I haven't gotten to it yet.
I'm up to speed all the way through season 3, and season 4 is coming out soonish.
And
I know I saw that on YouTube.
Is he a good
somewhere.
performer? Do you see him as a good fit?
I think he'd be a good fit because the Blue Beetle character that I've lost track of the iterations, because DC did a lot of universe changing stuff with their new
the
52
whole
and etc.
Reborn and everything. Yeah,
So
absolutely.
kind of mentally, I'm thinking like, well, this is kind of like a Spider-Man analogy, right? It's a teenage character who gets great power and now has great responsibility and does stuff that's cool, right? It feels like a younger character. I'm like, yeah, I could totally see this guy as being like a Tom Holland-ish kind of actor for this choice.
How I'm curious from your perspective, obviously as a Latino man, I wonder like how important is it? I see these pushes starting to happen. I see more and more that, you know, obviously they're casting, you know, beyond the, you know, overdone, you know, Caucasian stereotypes. You know, do you think that this resonates, you know, in your community in the same way that, you know, something like Black Panther, obviously, or some of those other things that were sort of good touchstones? We're seeing more female-led superhero movies. We're seeing, you know, obviously they're trying to diversify. We're seeing Shang-Chi. We're seeing Black Panther. Do you think that there's a possibility that this resonates that way?
Ooh, that's interesting. I don't know. I mean, they don't even have a picture here of like, it's just like a picture of him from Cobra Kai, and down below is a screenshot of one of the comic book characters. So there's not even like a teaser here. It's so early. I'm hoping that it will. I'm hoping that people will latch onto it the way that they latched on to Black Panther. I'm not going to say it's going to be quite as successful as that because it's really hard to match, but the representation is important, right? I'm glad that they didn't, you know, whitewash the character, as is commonly said.
Yeah, it does seem like there's been a minor tipping point. Like even you say, like obviously Black Panther is just a great movie, but it did feel like a bit of a turning point of, you know, hey, maybe if we make these well, they're for everybody, but we can make sure that it's, you know, really valuable to a community that's underserviced.
Yeah. All right.
That's it. Moving on.
More to come in the future. I look forward to seeing a teaser poster or a teaser trailer, shaky Instagram or Twitter video. You know.
Well, you know what? Follow this guy on his socials, because I bet you he'll be. You know, I do find young performers can be really fun with their socials when they're making these things too.
Mm-hmm,
you know, they throw you a little teaser where they like show you the gloves, they show you the boots, and they just sort of leak out little teasers and stuff. Next up is a pretty easy one, and I think is a no-brainer, but good news that as we come to the end of season 1 of Star Wars: The Bad Batch, the Disney Plus series that sort of continues the story of the Clone Wars after the events of Revenge of the Sith, is getting a second season. I think, you know, Disney obviously had a long game on this one, you know, lots of merchandising opportunities and everything else. They weren't going to end it after one season, but really nice to know that it's definitely coming back and that it's coming probably next year. And hopefully a little later in this episode, we'll talk a little bit about season 1.
Yeah, I'm excited to see this come along. This was something that I followed along during the season. Yeah, it's a good show.
Next up, we've got another renewal, but not just one season, 7 more seasons of South Park.
What?
So the folks at Paramount apparently decided that they really needed to have some more South Park in their lives. So they have signed Matt and Trey for another 7 seasons. Plus, they've also added in a rather ridiculous amount of movies as well as part of this contract that they signed. Now, the money is a little misleading because it says that they got $900 million for 6 more years, but part of that is the production costs. So, you know, it's not like they're taking, you know, $900 million and putting it in their pockets, although I imagine the money they're making is pretty sick.
Yeah, but I mean, yeah, and they're not cutting out paper figures anymore like they did in the first
No, they're a well-oiled machine.
Yeah.
But yeah, interesting. So they're producing South Park now through season 30, so that's up until 2027 at least they're going to do. They're producing 14 movies for Paramount Plus based on South Park.
How many seasons has South Park been doing already?
So this is 6 more, so it's about to be season 24 this fall.
Wow. That's a long time.
It is, and then you consider that The Simpsons has been around already for 30 plus seasons, and you think, I guess that makes sense.
Yeah,
and
Google says 32. Assuming that's roughly accurate. You said South Park was 24. That feels about right. That time gap between 32 and 24.
Yeah, it's almost at this point. It seems like it's a game or a dare or something. Obviously, there's more episodes of Simpsons because they did more episodes per season than South Park has. But it is becoming a bit of a staring contest for these two shows too, as to who's going to keep going. Now, that being said, I have watched every episode of South Park ever, and I will probably watch every episode that they continue to make. I stopped watching The Simpsons over a decade ago, and I don't have huge intentions to go back and watch those. So, that obviously could just have to do with my tastes changing over time, my age in life, all those different circumstances. But it's interesting that they say this about the animation stuff. Obviously, it just keep going, especially if the voice actors are satisfied, or if you feel like you can find somebody else to do the voices of these things going forward, you can just keep cranking them out, right?
Right. Yeah. Well, they're still doing, Looney Tunes and we still have Muppet things coming out from time to time, even though those voice actors are long gone, right?
So. Well, and the characters don't age on the shows unless you want them to, and you can, just keep cranking them out.
Alrighty.
Yep. Next up, Y: The Last Man. So this is a show that's sort of was on again, off again. They weren't sure if they were going to make it. Well, they've made it. So we got our first trailer, our first actual look at Y: The Last Man, a series that's coming to FX, and it looks really kind of good. It looks very much like the comic book in its feel is very familiar. So this, for those who don't know, is a Vertigo comic book from DC Comics Vertigo imprint, and it was a great series by Brian Vaughan and Pia Guerra, who worked on this a number of years ago. It's been over probably almost a decade now. The premise is that there is a pandemic, but the pandemic strikes suddenly, swiftly, and kills every male of every species on Earth except for one man and his monkey.
Right.
And so the
monkey's male too?
He is. Ampersand the monkey. And it's a really interesting story that sort of explores, what would the world be like when he himself is one of the most valuable commodities on the planet, as well as trying to figure out why this one person and his monkey have survived.
Right.
And, just sort of a really interesting, good-looking cast. Again, really interesting feel to it. I like FX as a production. I like that they do some of these more mature stories, Legion and some of those things. So I'm really curious to see what they do with this, and I hope that it has some of those same feels that the series does, because I really, really enjoyed that series a lot, and I think this could be a good property if people latch onto it. I was disappointed by AMC's Preacher series, not in the quality of the show, but that they rushed it. First it was too slow, then it was too fast, and then it was gone. So I hope that we actually get multiple seasons. They let this story play out the way that it needs to, that it has a nice run, and it isn't just wham bam and thank you. But the trailer looks good, and I hope it's here for a few years in our lives.
Cool. Alrighty.
If you enjoyed Idris Elba in his role on the Suicide Squad, you'll be very excited to know that he's going to be voicing the character Knuckles in the Sonic the Hedgehog sequel. So we've got the teaser there, which is just the begloved spiked fist of the character Knuckles that was tweeted out by Mr. Elba himself.
Yeah,
kind of an interesting choice there to have that sort of actor for that. But I bet it's fun for him.
I found myself during the NBA playoffs, they were playing a commercial over and over again where he was doing a voiceover talking about how amazing the NBA playoffs are and how majestic basketball is. And I kept thinking to myself, well, one, you're British, so it's kind of weird. And also, how did you convince Idris Elba to, like, what? Why him for this? And then I heard this news and I was like, oh, he just wants money. Okay, all right. That makes much more sense.
He saw what Nicolas Cage was doing. He's like, bro, let me get in on that.
He didn't get the James Bond, right? So
When I think of him, I'm like, okay, The Wire, Luther, some of his movie roles. He's an amazing actor and he's an incredibly good-looking dude. And I keep thinking, like, I have him sort of, in a tier of esteem, and then he makes some of these choices, and I'm like, okay.
Maybe it's his manager.
Again, or I don't know anything about him personally. Maybe he's got some ex-wives to pay or children to support, or I don't know.
Yeah, it is interesting when you see some of the decisions that actors seem to make, or you wonder why. Like, how do they pitch this? I mean, other than this is for money, but how do they pitch these stories to actors? Like, they're always going on about, oh, I read the script and it was like just wonderful and whatever. But how do you position something like this to someone who, in our opinion, maybe not in his own opinion, but in our opinion, is sort of a class actor?
Again, maybe he's got kids and he thinks it'll be fun and that they'll have a good time watching it.
Well,
that seems to happen too, right?
Antonio Banderas and the Spy Kids, or whatever it was called.
Yeah, and we've obviously seen lots of actors transition from more adult roles to sillier roles because they've got kids and they're like, oh, my kids couldn't watch my movies, but now they can see me be this character.
Right. Yeah, cool. I was trying to think of, there was somebody. Some actors watching on Graham Norton talking about, Ewan McGregor, when he runs into some kids sometimes and he's like trying to convince them that he's Obi-Wan Kenobi. No, really, I'm Obi-Wan Kenobi. Like, they're like, no, you're not.
You, sir, are no Alec Guinness.
Exactly. Alrighty, well, here we are at the part of the show where we start talking about Star Trek, and this time we're season 2, episode 1 of Lower Decks. Strange Energies, and Jaime is going to take the recap lead here. Here you go.
Yeah, so we start out in a mysterious space station that is in an asteroid field with some Cardassian ships floating around, and inside is a Cardassian interrogating Ensign Mariner, who the Cardassian interrogator uses something called a excruciator to get Mariner to recap her relationship, both personal and working with her mother, and in a way, kind of recap season 1 of the Lower Decks. So kind of an interesting way to do that.
Yeah, pretty clever.
But Mariner, being the beast that she is, takes the interrogator hostage and blasts her way out in a nice little action sequence. En route, she runs into good autocorrect, not Boimler. Or at least the hologram version of which, who's a captee, and she talks out loud about her emotional status, about like, I'm leaving you behind because that's exactly what Boimler did to me when he moved to the Titan, right? And he let my best friend let me alone.
And he drops a line. They keep showing me lights.
Yeah, that was good.
There were notably lights in that interrogation room that are definitely from that episode of TNG where Captain Picard is captured and interrogated by the Cardassians.
Right.
So this action sequence ends up again. The Cardassian is still hostage. The interrogator is still hostage. So Mariner makes her way to a Miranda class vessel, which the interwebs tells me is the USS Macduff, NCC 1877. Ships get blown up real good during this escape from what appears to be like a museum or junkyard kind of thing. There's all sorts of little tidbits. I probably have to pause this and go back and see. There's like a runabout. I think there might be a Ferengi Marauder in there. There's just like a ton of cool stuff in the background there. And this kicks into an epic chase sequence during the escape, which is interrupted by an Andorian named Jennifer, who it reveals this is all taking place on the holodeck. This is not a real mission. There seems to be a bit of no love lost between Jennifer and Mariner. So something to keep a watch on for the rest of the season.
I like the line about what are you doing? Cardio.
Yeah. Which leads
what do you do? Yoga.
right. Not space yoga, not Andorian yoga, Vulcan yoga. No, nothing just regular, plain old yoga. Mariner's, apparently has been using this as an exercise mechanism, and she starts doing squats on the bridge. And the Cardassian character is like, "Are you squatting? We're going to die." And she's like, "It's leg day." So, head to title sequence, which I noticed has been redone a little bit.
Yes.
I'm sure there's somebody who's done side by side, but I'm like, oh, there's like the graphics are a little bit different. There's some sort of different ship during the sequence where the Borg and the Romulans are fighting. So I'm sure somebody somewhere has a scene by scene comparison, but kudos to the folks for redoing that. We come back from the title sequence. Captain Freeman has a personal log that updates us on what's going on. The USS Cerritos is finishing up its contact duties on the planet Apurgos, or Apurgos, I forgot how they pronounce it. And Apurgos. Apurgos, is that what it was? Okay. Yep. Captain Freeman is telling us in the log that her daughter has another side mission request, which is just getting on her nerves, is getting very annoying, having to work with Ensign Mariner. Mariner, turns out, wants to power wash the capital there to inspire folks to do it themselves because they let it get all dirty during their Industrial Revolution. We also learned that Commander Ransom is awkwardly in the room, clearly not getting any love and attention during this weird sequence between the captain and Mariner. Ensign Mariner does end up going to see the remaining lower deckers who are still in the Cerritos. Rutherford, we find out, has a date, and Tendi has feelings about that. I think very obvious boiling to the top feelings, but this becomes the B plot in this episode. On the surface, Tendi seems concerned about Rutherford liking things he didn't like before he got his new implant, such as pears. Folks who may not remember, in a very epic sequence, Security Officer Shax had ripped the cybernetic implant right out of Rutherford's head and used it to save the day before he pushed Rutherford out into the shuttle to escape the exploding Pakled ship. That's what this is being talking about, right? So in any case, Tendi's concerned about this new cybernetic implant. It seems like it's changed Rutherford, and she says he might have SMD, synthetic memory degradation, where his brains are going to liquefy and slide out of his nose. We go back to Apurgos, where Captain Ransom is trying to help them, choose their official comms number that Starfleet can communicate to them with, and they are just very picky about it due to their deep relationship with numbers. Mariner sasses and disobeys Commander Ransom. She's like, "I don't have to listen to you. I'm on a special mission. Captain's orders," right? I don't know this character's rank, but Mr. Stevens just kisses butt all over on Ransom. This will come up again in the episode. So Mariner starts cleaning the building where a nice fresco appears, and also there's a strange device seemingly powered by the sun, which has, now able to interact with the device, given that it no longer is covered in eons of sci-fi stuff, quote, starts happening due to the strange energies, and Ransom is hit, as is normal to happen in Star Trek. So here we get the cat doctor, Dr. Tana, beams down to give quite literally the diagnosis of strange energy straight to the cortex, and name drops, "Is this a Gary Mitchell situation?" Which I sort of vaguely knew, but I'm not quite as familiar with that character. Do we want to take a little sidebar for somebody who's better?
Very first
episode.
Very first episode of the show, of the original series is, the pilot, which was became the Cage. The first episode, Gary Mitchell gets exposed by some sort of radiation, becomes godlike, and they end up having to leave him on a planet. And I think he takes his girlfriend, who was I forgot her name, but she was the lady who played Hot Lips Houlihan on MASH, the movie. They both end up becoming godlike, and they have to leave them on the planet for some reason. I'm not sure if he's still on that planet.
No, that's a different one. In this one, he dies at the end of that episode. Remember, he digs a grave for Kirk. He's going to kill him at the end of that episode, and then Kirk turns the tables on him, and basically a landslide. He ends up in the pit, and then a landslide crushes him to death. That's how the episode ends.
But like the Emperor, like, you know what I mean? Like, he's a godlike guy, right? So
I guess he's a flat
but yeah,
one. But
it's a throwback to the very first episode of Star Trek.
Yeah, it was called Where No Man Has Gone Before. That was the first real official Star Trek episode.
And that was the guy from I have his autograph on my wall over here. He was the guy who played the second astronaut on 2001: A Space Odyssey.
Mm-hmm.
What's his name now? Yeah, Gary Lockwood played Gary Mitchell. Carry on.
All right, with that in context, because that will become important later in the episode, Commander Ransom starts going godlike by hovering, creating creepy weather phenomenon, reading minds, and shooting rainbow beams out of his hands. But apparently staying a god requires using telekinesis to pump iron by like telekinetically lifting up trees and boulders and stuff.
Yeah, I love that they kept him in character as the kind of douchey commander that we've come to know, who's like, you know, focused on his body and everything else, even though he's godlike.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So Admiral Freeman, Ensign Mariner's father, sends a communique to Captain Freeman. And the Admiral says that there could be a promotion for Captain Freeman to a capital ship if the captain keeps a clean record. This is, of course, just as everything is going south on this mission, so there's a bit of pressure there to resolve the situation ASAP. Meanwhile, Tendi is doing some shock therapy to Rutherford to figure out, like, you know, does he still like pears? Is this SMD situation to the problem? Rutherford's like, dude, I'm just gonna stop this. This is insane. Like, I'm totally fine. And he leaves to go on his date with the character Barnes. And this is where Tendi pulls out what I think is best described as a medical shotgun. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know how else to describe this. It's a
sci-fi battle rifle. Yeah.
Yeah. We go back to the plot.
It's made from tricorders and stuff, right? Like they all snap together like a.
Yeah, exactly.
Gun, yeah.
So back on the planet, Commander Ransom, Thanos snaps the moon, making it not exist anymore, transmogrifies a museum into this weird twisted sculpture, and turns the planet's peoples into a race of ransomites. So everybody has his face just walking around.
So funny. They all look like him. I will make ransomites. Yeah.
So there's a disagreement between Captain Freeman and Ensign Mariner about, like, how should they resolve this? Should they calm Ransom down by blasting him? Somewhere along here, Stevens bows before Ransom. He's all on board in this new religion. And they ask, like, how did they deal with Gary Mitchell? And the doctor says, well, Kirk smooshed him with a boulder, which...
Yeah, that's pretty right.
I guess is the recap of that episode. Continuing along, Ransom becomes a giant godlike head. And then we switch scenes over to Rutherford on his date. And we learned that... didn't catch her rank. I don't know if she's ensign or lieutenant, but Lady Barnes there apparently has an older sister who got a symbiont, because I think she's Trill. And they talk about how they, you know, changed personalities by always bringing it up, as I guess you might lord over your sisters as you wanted to do. Barnes wants to go on a swimsuit date with others, including Rutherford, but Tendi comes in with the medical shotgun and the hypo sprays with medical venom, just trying to latch onto Rutherford to supposedly save him from his SMT situation. Meanwhile, Ransom's giant head is approaching the Cerritos while his disconnected body, is creating a gym utopia on the planet where everything is turning into, you know, gym equipment, weights and treadmills and etc. And they talk about, like, well, what if they try overloading him by boosting his powers? And it turns out, nope, the phasers are just making him more powerful, as he literally states. And then they say, all right, well, let's try reasoning with him. And it turns out that Ransom, in a callback to the earlier scene in the episode, is jealous because he used to be number one with the captain. And then Mariner took that spot purely because she's the captain's daughter, right? Mm-hmm. Meanwhile, back over to the B plot, Rutherford is, you know, running away from Tendi and ends up cornered in a corridor, sets up an emergency force field to save himself from Tendi. And also, meanwhile, we see Ransom's head biting the warp nacelle as seen through the window here. He's just like chewing on it like a dog on a bone. And here we have a real heartwarming scene where, Tendi admits that SMD isn't real for Rutherford, right? And we sort of switch between these two rapid fire things of Freeman and Mariner admitting that they don't like working with each other. It's getting on their nerves. Ransom grows a cloud and starts biting the saucer section itself.
The front view where you just see his giant mouth coming in was hilarious.
Yeah, and it's like biting like a turtle or an eggshell, right? Because they've got the shields on, so he's not biting the saucer section quite directly. So that was kind of cool. Meanwhile, Tendi admits she was afraid that Rutherford had changed so much with his new implant, and that maybe he would stop liking her. And Rutherford is like, "I'm totally okay with that. You're tackling an emotional problem with scientific experimentation. That's what I'm really into." Right? Things get worse outside the ship as Ransom grows hands and physically grabs the Cerritos. And they try something different, seeming that he just wants validation. The captain gives validation to Ransom, and it starts diminishing his power.
So just a note too that while Tendi and Rutherford are having this B plot thing out the windows, you can still see Ransom attacking the ship.
Yeah. They didn't even notice it's happening.
Yeah, they didn't even notice it. Yeah, like typical situation comedy where characters are oblivious to what's really going on, right?
Yeah, because it's just another day in Starfleet, right? Yeah. That's just Tuesday. So Captain Freeman starts using weird or random affirmations, and Mariner's like, "Look, you can't keep praising him forever. That's not going to work." It turns out that Ransom wants, the captain's chair. He's feeling that, and his power starts resuming, and the doom is coming. But it suddenly stops. And it turns out that the reason it stops is because kicking him repeatedly in the groin was the answer. And this is what Mariner uses as the Kirk maneuver equivalent.
She kicked him in the boulders.
Yes, quite repeatedly until he calms down, and he tastes the rainbow as he spits out some rainbow colored liquid. But then his eyes start glowing again, so the kicking continues while Dr. Tana forklifts a boulder onto Ransom to bring it end to the problem. Just a space forklift with a huge boulder. She just drops on him. And then we see Ransom recovering in sickbay, and the sycophant Stevens reads him a story. And we have Captain Freeman and Ensign Mariner talk about working apart and only doing some side missions. There's a security team ready to take me to the brig, isn't there? I love you. Never disobey me again. I do whatever I want. As the captain and daughter zing each other.
And she gets dragged away to...
Yeah, as the security team is ready, taking her away. And so we do see Mariner in the brig, and she's visited by Rutherford and Tendi, who said that they actually did revert one of Rutherford's synaptic pathways. So he's no longer... he never elects pairs, and he's got the great profanity quote that I'm sure somebody's going to use in the future. And then they start thinking about, think of all the fun adventures that Boimler is having on the USS Titan. Smash cut to Boimler screaming on the bridge of the USS Titan as the ship is chased by a bunch of Pakled ships. That doesn't seem to faze Captain Riker, who says, this jam session has too many licks and not enough comp. And both I and Boimler screen, what does that even mean? I don't understand this statement here. And they go into an anomaly, space anomaly, Star Trek anomaly, to avoid the Pakleds. And Riker says, I love my job, as reality starts to warp and bend the bridge crew. The end of the episode.
Yeah, back with a bang. What a funny episode. I just picked right up where they left off. Obviously, they haven't resolved everything in this episode, but they definitely picked up some of the threads and wrapped up a couple of the storylines that carried over. But God, I love this show. I just love it. It makes me laugh out loud. It's a perfect balance between being earnest and just super, super funny. I can't get enough of it. I love this show.
Yeah, and all the sort of the drops Easter egg drops for all the the fans, the five lights, different things going on, like the throwback to the first episode of TNG.
Yep. But even at the end there, they make a reference to Nightingale Woman, right? That's the poem that Gary Mitchell quotes in that episode. Like it's just deep cuts after deep cuts, but it's funny and it works on a very superficial level. You could just watch it and it's funny, or if you're way into Trek, it is just an absolute cornucopia of in jokes and silliness.
Indeed. Good show. Can we talk about Bad Batch a bit?
Yeah.
So, yeah, and this is the last episode that we just watched, right?
So season 1 is over. So I think it was 16 episodes all in. Jaime, did you watch it week by week?
I did watch it week by week. And for me, I haven't watched the latest seasons of Clone Wars and haven't watched any of Rebels. And yet I was able to get the gist pretty well. I'm like, all right, cool. There's these special clones, Hunter, Tech, Crosshair, and Wrecker, joined by I think a Reg who got injured in some way in the form of Echo, because he's more
his storyline plays out in Clone Wars. He was basically at one point captured and sort of modified by the separatists.
Yeah, so I think they did a good job of, like, if you know the backstory, it fills things in more. But I don't think it was strictly necessary. So I came in not knowing much of anything about the Bad Batch, and fully enjoyed this season.
Yeah, I think in this case, almost all you really need to have done is seen Revenge of the Sith and watch the sort of prequel trilogy. It certainly, there's lots of stuff in there for fans of Clone Wars and for fans of Rebels, and and everything that you get out of those ones. But you're right. I think as long as okay, so the war is over, the bad guys won, the Jedi are gone, you're pretty much there. And you're right, like there is a sort of Bad Batch arc in the final season on Disney Plus of Clone Wars that introduces the characters more thoroughly and everything else, but you don't have to. You could certainly just jump right into it. I am glad, though. I mean, we talked about it on our previous episode. I was in the middle of a Clone Wars rewatch. So I had watched the first, I think, 5 seasons, but I'd never watched the last 2. And so I watched from the beginning again, straight through, and then jumped right into Bad Batch, and then finished up all my rewatch, watching the last sort of 2 episodes in real time of Bad Batch. And yeah, there's definitely a lot of glue. There's a lot of different pieces that if you have consumed all that material, it certainly adds some layers to it, but it's just a good show on all its levels. How about you, Tim? What did you think?
No, I enjoyed it. I mean, and again, like Jaime, I haven't finished watching all of Clone Wars or even the last season. I do recall these guys from, as I mentioned before, one of the first episodes of the series, they replay or they go back through a battle simulation that they went through in the very first one when they were the Bad Batch, and because they were sort of like the 5 guys that were not going to graduate or something like that.
Yeah, that's a different group. It's actually
okay.
Yeah, that is a different bunch of. They were more sort of like less perfect batch, less than perfect batch that needed to learn some lessons. The Bad Batch specifically, they actually introduced at the beginning of season 7 of the Clone Wars, and they sort of come in. They're Squad 99. They're already established. They're these sort of custom clones that they made. Each one of them has a special skill. They were trying to sort of see if they could mess with the DNA of the original host a little bit and see if they could tweak and hyper accelerate some of these traits. So Hunter's the tracker, obviously. They've got Wrecker's this big, huge, burly version of the clone. Crosshair's got this sure shot sniper ability. Tech's got this increased intelligence, and then they added in Echo as part of a storyline in Clone Wars as well, because he was actually part of Rex's crew at one point, but then he got lost and then later on rescued, and it changed his abilities, and he felt more comfortable with this group than he did with the sort of traditional regiment. So he joins up with the Bad Batch and sort of becomes the fifth Beetle there.
Right. And it's interesting too that I'm just looking at the IMDb that the voice of the Bad Batch characters is similar to Clone Wars, was all played by the same actor.
Yeah, D. Bradley Baker.
This is, he does the voice for all of these characters, and they're very distinct in terms of temperament and character and voice, especially like Wrecker, right? Because Wrecker has sort of a, like you said, he seems to be a little damaged in a sense, right? So.
Yeah, no, it's interesting how he does them all differently, considering it's still the root of the same person.
He also does Crosshair too, I guess, right? Yeah.
Yeah, all of them, yeah. And the Regulation clones and Rex. There's actually the one episode where Rex crosses over with them, where you're like, damn, D. Bradley Baker's doing 8 voices in this episode.
So does he do the voices in the Clone Wars series?
He is the voice of every single clone in the Clone Wars cartoon.
Oh, interesting.
And he, not to spoil too much, but he does do some voices in Rebels as well.
Right. So it's interesting too, the Omega character. She's sort of the super clone. She was actually, they reveal in the final episode that she's actually older than the other clones, even though she's looks like a young kid, right?
Yep. But she's a pure clone like Boba.
Yeah, and the thing about it is that, she's not been modified, right? But interesting that they chose sort of an Australian accent for her, or is that just
I think she's a Kiwi, actually. I think she's a New Zealander.
Kiwi?
Yeah.
Well, yeah, but you know what I mean, like from down there, right? Because
she calls herself Omega.
Omega, yeah, and it's bed bitch, right? Anyway, and all around good show. I mean, not super duper, but like compelling enough to keep you going, and it's Star Wars is enough to that it's compelling and.
Yeah, and in mid-season too, obviously the overarching arc ties into Star Wars writ large in a lot of different ways. The whole sort of, why by the time we get to by the New Hope are the soldiers, soldiers and not clones. So this is obviously getting us into that area, which is kind of cool.
Well, and how they deal with, how come they can't make any more clones? I won't, spoil it for people.
Or don't. Yeah. And obviously, it does sort of segue into, the sort of mission of the week storyline a little bit there, where they're like, well, how are we going to live? They go in and they start doing the missions where, they go to Ord Mantell. Ord Mantell is kind of a cool little callback too, because that's a place that's mentioned in Empire Strikes Back. Han Solo mentions it when he's arguing with Leia in the ice tunnels. He says the bounty hunter we ran into in Ord Mantell. And then there was an audio adventure for Star Wars that came out in between there that I got when I was a kid. I actually still have it on cassette. That is called Rescue Mission to Ord Mantell, and it's about this storyline where they have to go and do this mission where they're going to steal a bunch of credits because they need to help fund the rebellion and stuff. So it's a nice callback, deep cut kind of Star Wars thing. But they end up on this planet, and they end up doing sort of all these sort of mercenary missions for the character who's played by Rhea Perlman from Cheers, which made me laugh. The voice is so funny, and it's so immediately, as soon as you hear it, you're like, oh, it's Rhea Perlman. That's awesome. But yeah, cool stuff going on there. And obviously, Omega sort of, learning from them and growing in confidence, her connections to all the different characters, the Mantell mix. Every time they win a mission, she and Wrecker go out and run up a tab buying Mantell mix. And, it's a fun sort of, works on a lot of layers kind of different thing. But it also, one thing that sort of occurred to me is as we sort of got to the end of the first season, and obviously we've talked a little bit about it already, but we'll sort of say, hey, spoilers, but I wonder timeline-wise how this might align or set the stage in a few different ways for what we're seeing in The Mandalorian, which we know happens a few years later, but we also know, some of the circumstances overlap. There's this whole storyline where, the Kaminoans are aware of the fact that their relationship with the new empire is degrading. They're trying to sort of figure out their own path, and in the end the empire ends up basically kidnapping Ton Wei, who is the lead cloning scientist, the best cloner in the galaxy, and they bring her back and sort of say, well, we got a special job for you, and the person who she interacts with, the scientist that she interacts with, is dressed just like the character from the first season of The Mandalorian, the character who is, obviously a cloner too. And so I wonder if we're sort of all building towards setting more clarity around what happened in the cloning of Palpatine and, his sort of Plan B, story. So we get a better understanding of what happened to him at the end of his theoretical life at Return of the Jedi, and why he's back by the time we get to Revenge of the whatever the hell that last one was called, Skywalker something or other. I think there's a lot of threads being woven together here, and it's interesting because, again, it's a time period we don't know a heck of a lot of stuff about. It does, so this is happening sort of right after Revenge of the Sith. Mandalorian's happening about 5 years after, and then we know Rebels happens before. So it'll be interesting to see how all these different things sort of intersect. The Clone Wars stuff, the Mandalorian stuff. We're going to get this. I wonder if we're weaving together a real, more cohesive understanding of the movies by telling these backstories. I will say, I finished watching my rewatch, and I do recommend to both of you, go back when you get the time and watch particularly those last few, but the whole thing of Clone Wars. There's certainly some, Jar Jar nonsense and other episodes that are just sort of whatever. But especially as you get into those last few, there's some real mythology building things in there to do with Yoda and Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon and Ahsoka and it adds a real layer of intensity and sadness to the story of Anakin too, because you sort of see more and more of him. He's a much more fully realized character than we ever get in the movies.
Right.
And so his choices and his downfall is just that much more painful, especially because you're seeing it through Yoda's eyes and Obi-Wan's eyes and Ahsoka's eyes, and you don't get that in the movies. But yeah, the way that they're tying all these properties together and interlacing them and stuff is I think it's just in the same way we talked about The Mandalorian. It's kind of a better medium than a 2-hour movie sometimes.
Yeah, they've got some room to breathe. I think you're right. Tonally, the Bad Batch does seem to follow the Clone Wars, where there is sort of normal action stuff. There's Jar Jar Binks-esque kind of stuff. Yay, kids! And then there's oh my gosh, this is so dark. The last couple episodes of the season are very dark.
Very dark. Yeah. Yeah.
I like the way they tie the last season or last episode, last two episodes together without sort of doing a to be continued kind of deal. Like they kind of end on a cliffhanger on the second last episode, and then this one just picks right up.
Yeah, and it almost comes back to what we talked about, I think, on our last episode, where some of these things, they've chosen to release them week over week as opposed to in one big drop. But I wonder if you watch them in one big go, particularly those last few episodes, I think there'll be a really interesting flow to them. Really, I think the story will play out much differently. So did you say you didn't watch What If yet?
I know, I haven't watched it.
You've not watched it?
Go ahead.
No, we won't get too far into it. I just broadly say I enjoyed the first episode, and they did not overtly reference the events of Loki, but it'll be interesting to see how this story sort of plays out over the course of a season. Jaime, what did you think?
Yeah, I think I also got vibes that it feels like the whole, what are we in, phase 4 now?
Yeah.
4? Yeah, phase 4 is going to play into that multiverse of madness, the Doctor Strange movie. The series, the various series have played into it, some to more degree than others, and it feels like the What If, besides being a fun way to show cool comic book stuff, like the old comic stuff of what if Captain Carter, I don't know why she was Captain Carter, not Captain Britain. I know there is a Captain Britain character.
Yeah, I think that they might be saving that one for later.
Yeah, that's the only rationale I can have. Maybe they'll do a Captain Canada, which I googled. There is no Captain Canada, but there could be.
No Captain Canada. We have Guardian or we have Captain Canuck, but that's not even a Marvel character.
Right. And it seems fun. It seems pretty well done. It seems like they got a lot of actual voices not voice actors pretending, but like the actual actors doing their own voice.
Every single actor came back and did their voices except for two. The only two voices that are somebody else. Chris Evans didn't come back to play Captain America, and Hugo Weaving didn't come back to play the Red Skull. They used Russ Marquand again. He's the one who did it for Endgame. So it's sort of a return for that one, but it's not from like the same time period. It's obviously not Hugo Weaving, but yeah, I mean Sebastian Stan is there. Obviously, Haley Atwell is the star again, and they even brought back just for like a couple of seconds. They brought back Stanley Tucci to be the voice of the doctor who gives the powers too. It's interesting that they what they've been able to do, and it'll be really interesting to see how that plays out over the course of the season. If they're going to just keep bringing back all these famous voices, are they going to get Michael B. Jordan? Are they going to get Robert Downey Jr.? How many different people are really going to be that versus? I mean, it looks obviously Chris Evans didn't participate here. I wonder if he might be in something else or not, just because he may have been doing something else. But
yeah. And I guess kudos for an art design choice. This is a non-spoiler because I mean you know that Agent Carter becomes Captain Carter. I was impressed that they gave her a more Amazonian type body after. It wasn't just like, oh, it's the same, small woman character model, but now she's super strong. It's like, no, this is a fighter, right? This is somebody who is like Steve Rogers became really jacked after getting the
well, that's the whole
suit.
idea, right? Like she gets jacked instead of him, sort of thing.
Well, yeah, I don't mean just like the story themes. I mean the actual art design, where it's pretty typical. Like let's take a little segue into like Disney princesses, right? Where like the female characters have to stay on model and pretty, and the male characters, no matter how attractive they are, can get the weird, ugly, gross Shrek-like face. But the ladies always have to stay, staying pretty. That's not the case here. There's like, look, whatever your feelings are, like she can still be attractive as a woman, but she's a powerful, like bodybuilder type woman now, which is unusual for art design choices.
I did think it was kind of odd, though, and this may be going a little too deep into this, but I did find it odd, though, that she comes out with this, again, huge set of shoulders, strong arms. She's, as you say, Amazonian. She still has Haley Atwell's chest. Like, yeah, she's Haley Atwell's, she's a beautiful, beautiful woman, but she's very large chested too. And I thought it was just interesting that it wasn't like they gave her a bodybuilder's stereotypical bodybuilding woman's physique, which is to say more muscular in the chest and less obviously chesty.
Bosom, yeah.
But yeah, I thought that was the only one where I was a little quibble where I'm like, if she was that like muscular, I'm not sure that she would have as much of a chest.
That's true.
But you mentioned it, Jaime. The animation I thought was an interesting choice. Like it's somewhat realistic. I thought the action sequences and the facial expressions. I thought it was an interesting style choice to do it this way. It's sort of cartoony, but it's almost like Don Bluth. It's almost like Space Ace or Dragon's Lair or something. Like it's kind of got this sort of shaded feel to it, but very emotive faces and very fluid action.
Yeah, they've got the cell shading that gives them that 2D animated look, but actual 3D models. So it's pretty interesting. I definitely think folks should check it out. I think they're going to keep the consistent look and feel for all the episodes, from what I can tell.
Yeah, it seems from the trailer that's what they're going for. But yeah, I think it's off to a good start. Again, it was certainly a compelling story, but I didn't feel like there was a lot of substance or carrying the plot forward especially after the sort of end of Loki. It didn't feel like this one sort of picks the ball up and runs with it as much, except in that obviously the Jeffrey Wright as the Watcher character at the beginning and the end, sort of talking about infinite possibilities, infinite universes and stuff. But yeah, even if all it is this, I think it's really worth watching. But I wonder, as the season plays out, if we'll see more substance being added to it too, more moving the ball down the field.
Cool. Sounds like there's a party going on there, John.
Yeah, it's. I think supper's being prepared. It's almost 6:00 our time here, and it
That's
seems,
true. Yeah.
seems like
so
the.
Let's bang through the watch list then, shall we?
Yeah.
All right. So since you were up first.
Yeah, so last year, or if you'll recall, around the holiday season, we got our little homage to the Star Wars Holiday Special. We got the Lego Star Wars Holiday Special. Not quite as tragically bad as the previous one. This year, they're jumping the gun. They're not doing another holiday special. They're going to do the Lego Star Wars Terrifying Tales coming on October 1st on Disney Plus, and this is going to be a sort of a fun, I'm sure kid-friendly Lego Star Wars adventure set around sort of a spooky Halloween-y kind of theme.
Yeah.
And interesting. I'll be curious to see, as I've always enjoyed the Lego Star Wars, both the games and the animated versions, and it'll be interesting to see what they do to sort of add a little spookiness to the Star Wars mythos.
And then we have
me again. Yeah, so this one just caught my eye, and again appealed to me as a Trek fan and for our Trek podcast. So Playmobil, the popular kids' toys, have been adding licensed products to their materials for a little while now. You know, they've done a Back to the Future, they've done a Ghostbusters, and there's probably many more that I haven't seen. But the other day, the one that caught my eye is we're getting a Playmobil USS Enterprise with bridge crew, and it looks pretty awesome. It really does. It looks cool. It's, you know, you could take the top of the saucer off, and the bridge is there, and the whole thing. It lights up. It's got, you know, special effects and stuff like that. I think it's gonna be pretty expensive, but it also comes with, you know, these hooks that you can hang it from your ceiling and stuff like that. And I grew up with Playmobil. Playmobil is European, and that is my background, and so Playmobil was a big toy for my big brother and I to play with when we were kids, and it was always, you know, it was knights and castles, it was, you know, adventures and stuff like that. It was never anything sort of licensed. We kind of had to make up our own stuff on our own. But man, I'm telling you, you know, 8-year-old me would have been all over the Playmobil USS Enterprise. That's pretty awesome.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, this looks incredible, and
not to scale, by the way.
No, definitely not to scale. But the thing that strikes me as I look at this slideshow on this website is, no wonder Scotty drinks. The poor man is all by his lonesome in the engineering section, while all the rest of the senior bridge crew gets to hang out and have fun.
He's on the lower deck,
right?
Yeah, he's the original lower decks guy.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a really, really cool playset. Again, it's funny though, because it does. You think to yourself though, like, clearly this is for a bit more of the collector market. Like, how many 8-year-olds now are like, I want to play with Kirk and Spock and Scotty? Like, none, zero is the answer.
Yeah, and of course it's got a USB port for charging. Ooh, and it's got a hanging thing so you can hang it.
Yeah, that little hanger thing with the Enterprise, with the Trek logo is pretty cool.
Yeah, it's definitely seems like something that a collector would want, right?
Yeah, I mean, again, if you like me, if you grew up with that sort of, with the Playmobil, and it's always fun to see the different interpretations. You see them adapted in all kinds of ways. You're like, oh, there's Kirk as a Mego doll in the 1970s. Oh, there's Kirk as an action figure in the 1990s. Oh, there's Kirk as a what are those things called? The little oh god, though, it's the one up from Seattle there, Jaime. The ones that Funko Pops.
Funko Pop, right?
Funko Pops. Yeah, you can get all those characters like that. Well, you can see them as a Lego character. Well, now you can see them as a Playmobil character. It's always fun to see the different iterations of these characters.
All right. What's next, Jaime? You're up.
A few different ones. One is a site called Nestflix. Very similar to Netflix. This is apparently, and I linked the Verge article on this. This is a, quote, Netflix for fake movies and shows from real movies and shows. So if you're wondering, what are we talking about? It's like, well, take a movie like Home Alone. You remember that keep the change, you filthy animal, mobster kind of thing? That's angels with filthy souls, as shown in this database. Or how about Good Will Hunting 2, Hunting Season from Jay and Silent Bob Strike Back? Or let's say History of the World Part 2, which was previewed in History of the World Part 1, the 1981 Mel Brooks film. So kind of a neat little thing. It's kind of cool to peruse Any comments, questions, concerns?
That sounds fun. I am on board. I'm going to check this one out for sure.
Yeah, sadly, they don't seem to have links. I'm hoping this gets popular enough that they'll have like YouTube links or clips or official media or something where you watch the scene sort of stuff. But this is a fun thing for the industry.
Yeah, for sure. I'm always I love those little pieces of movies, those little what ifs and tastes of those things. It could be a lot of fun.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. The next thing I have is, and I apologize, I don't know how you all see this other than theaters. I recommend The Suicide Squad, the sequel done by James
You always
Gunn.
go to the U.S. to watch it, eh, John? Oh, wait. Never mind.
Well, if things are open down here, you and I will both be here, as will number one fan next week. Just saying.
I want to see Fun Guy. What's it called?
Oh, Free Guy.
Free Guy.
Yeah, great. Huh? Again, we'll be here together, Thursday, Friday next week.
For a day or so. Yeah.
So The Suicide Squad, without going into spoilers, is tonally more consistent, which is good, because I think for folks who don't remember what happened to the previous Suicide Squad movie, it was a much darker, grittier film, as DC is sort of doing in that era. They saw, ironically, the James Gunn directed Guardians of the Galaxy and how that was goofy and fun and how that did so well. The studio freaks out, says, we need to recut this to be more like Guardians of the Galaxy. It ends up feeling sort of weird of like, it's super dark here and then it's trying to be funny, haha. It doesn't fit together quite as well. This one, however, is tonally consistent. It is a dark comedy, I would say. It feels like The Boys, where it is, don't get me wrong, hyper violent, like incredibly violent as a movie, but it's presented in a humorous way. So use that as your guidance towards what to expect going in, and whether it's age appropriate for your particular wee ones. So
yeah, even the first one, again, my sons are old enough now that I wouldn't worry about it, but I wouldn't show it to anybody under the age of probably about 12. But this one, yeah, all the things that I've read have said the same thing as you, Jaime. It's basically somebody taking the Disney Marvel gloves off James Gunn, right?
Yeah, and I would say the thing that is surprising to me is the Shark King character, the half man, half shark character.
King Shark, yeah.
Surprises me in that a character that brutally murders people, I have, some serious, strong emotional feelings about. It's well done in that way, and there you go. There's your review for The Suicide Squad.
And they've confirmed online that what we suspected going in, that the voice of that is Sylvester Stallone, right?
Yes, who does a bit more work than Vin Diesel presumably had to do for Groot, which is fun to have these action guys do the weirdo characters.
Does that mean Schwarzenegger's going to turn up at some point?
I mean, you kind of need to, right, to fulfill that trifecta.
Yeah, I'm in.
Different choice that is probably a little bit more streaming and pandemic friendly is Transformers War for Cybertron Kingdom. This is the final miniseries as part of the overall War for Cybertron animated series on Netflix. Recommend checking it out, getting some closure on things. Since I knew that this was coming out and it was going to star some of the Transformers Beast Wars characters, I ended up rewatching all 50-some episodes of the 1990s CGI animated Beast Wars cartoon to get into it. I'll say I was a little disappointed they didn't bring back those voice actors for this one. It was a little weird hearing different voices. And I have a little bit of quibbles with some of the way they handled a little bit of the characters for the Beast Wars folks. But it's still fun seeing the Gen 1 Transformers, really looks pretty good. Optimus Prime and the Beast Wars Optimus Primal together. And similar to what I hopefully said about the previous two parts of the series, what was the first one called? Was it just called War for Cybertron? And then the next one's called whatever. Netflix has them all collected for you. I was pretty impressed how the villain Gen 1 Megatron is actually pretty understandable. And I think you can feel the emotions through him. You may not agree with his worldview or how he takes action, but I think you can agree with the, like, I understood how you got there thing. So that I'd like that they added a whole bunch of background and flavor to the I'm just going to kill you, Prime, sort of, and take over the world, sort of much more shallow characterization in from the 1984 series is much deeper here in this trilogy.
So how does it work how did you enjoy it as a trilogy? It's been on my radar again, and it's something that I'm an old school Transformers cartoon fan, and I like Beast Wars as well. How does this play out now that you've seen all these trilogies interlinked?
It's kind of like having like 3 different movies, I think. So if you haven't seen it before, it probably works even better just binging through, because I sort of had to remember, 6 months to a year in between each of these, what was happening, and that hurt a little bit, but you still get the gist of what's going on. And without going too much into spoilers, it does seem like they could set up for another series here if they wanted to. So we'll see. Cool.
Alrighty. Well, my picks are sort of off the beaten track in terms of what they're about, because I did watch a few of the sci-fi stuff that we talked about last time, like the milkshake one, and a rather interesting story, but that we talked about last episode. But the ones I want to talk about are a couple of things. One is on Disney Plus, and the other is on Apple TV Plus, and they're both music related, surprisingly. The first one is called Watch the Sound, and it's a new series on Apple TV Plus, and it goes through it's hosted by a guy, I can't remember his name, and I had no idea who he was until one of the episodes where he talks about reverb. Apparently he is the producer who worked with Amy Winehouse on her breakthrough record, and he examines the use of different effects in music production. Like, he talks about synthesizers in one, he talks about sampling in another, he talks about reverb, he talks about different effects and the drum machines and stuff like that were used in hip hop, and he's a big hip hop DJ kind of guy. But he also talks to people like Paul McCartney and Dave Grohl and the Beastie Boys and a lot of rap artists, hip hop artists, and the guy who made the Lynn drum machine. Talks to all those folks about this stuff, and where it ties in is on the synthesizer episode. He covers how a lot of women were involved in early synthesizer work. Synthesis of sound, and one of the pioneers was a lady named Delia. I've forgotten her last name, but she is in fact worked for the BBC, and there's a famous BBC video of them talking about synthesis. It's black and white, and she's the main person talking in this little documentary about how sound is synthesized. And she in fact is the person who created the Doctor Who theme. Using synthesizers, and actually with like a very, very rudimentary synthesizer. It wasn't like a Moog or anything like that, but starts with an oscillator, and she did the whole thing that the gentleman who wrote the song or wrote the piece gave it to her to do. She did it all up in with synthesis, and he came back and heard it after she did it, and he goes, "Did I write that?" And she says, "Well, most of it." And apparently she's quite famous, and she's well known. Like, she comes up a lot when talking about synthesizers. Synthesizers. The other piece that I saw, I think it's called McCartney 123. It's on Disney Plus. It just sort of was like, it showed up on my, I guess, I don't know, in like Netflix, it kind of suggests shows that you might be interested in, and it's Rick Rubin and Paul McCartney talking about how they produce the music, and they actually have the tapes, and Rick Rubin and McCartney go through how they built up all the various songs by the Beatles and by Wings and all that kind of stuff. So it's a really interesting show. It's about 6 episodes long, an hour long, or 30 minutes long each, and they dig quite in. If you're a Beatle fan or a McCartney fan, or just curious about how music is produced, that's another great show to watch, where they break it down and they talk about all the different ways that they wrote the songs and the stories behind why they wrote particular things and stuff like that. So it's really interesting, fascinating stuff to sort of dig in the sort of behind the scenes on how the Beatles made their recordings and how amazing Paul McCartney is as a musician in general. So there you go. That's my picks for this week.
Cool.
Anywho, I guess that's it for another week. So if people want to get in touch with you, Jonathan, how would they find you?
You can find me on Twitter and Instagram as @JPK News.
All right. And Jaime, if people want to get in touch with you, how would they do that?
I'm on Twitter as @DevWithTheHair.
All righty. My name is Tim Mitra, TIMMITRA. On the Twitter machine is where you'll find me hanging out. So until next time, we'll say bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
You've been listening to the Spotcast podcast. If you want to find out more about the podcast or see the episode show notes, visit the Spotcast website at spotcast.com. You can get in touch with us on the website or follow us on Twitter at Spotcast. If you have feedback or questions, send us a tweet with the hashtag AskSpotcast. If you like the show, please consider recommending us to a friend, writing a review on iTunes, or pledging any amount at patreon.com/Spotcast. You can find details on how to help us on our website, spotcast.com/sponsor us. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you in the future.
I guess we'll be face to face next time.
For the first time, we'll have 2 out of 3 of us in the same space doing a pod next week.
Same province, same regional vicinity. Yeah.
One day, Jaime, one day we're doing that live episode. All 3 of us.
Not,
a hell of a
not infeasible, given that pandemic comes to an end at some point. I would like to get out to Toronto, check things out. And so
maybe we'll go to Seattle for the Kraken opening.
Ooh,
game.
hey, now you're talking.
Man, I'm really hoping things turn around for that sort of thing. But I'm kind of, I mean, if hockey was ordinarily played in open stadiums instead of indoor arenas, it might be a little different. But getting a little dodgy as we record right now as to what's going to happen in the winter month or the fall months.
Yeah, well, they're just starting to open up music venues here in Toronto. I think the Arkells are doing a concert this weekend.
Yeah, they're doing like a 3-night set. I saw some pictures, and it looked pretty close quarters.
Is it like people are packed in?
Yeah.
Like normal?
I saw one picture that was posted that someone had taken from the side of the stage, and it didn't, there was an open, standing area in the front, most shows at that venue. Again, it's an outdoor venue, so, maybe they are qualified because it's an outdoor venue. Obviously it's not happening, inside of an arena with closed doors and everything.
Were people in those pictures wearing masks, or they're...
I did see masks. I did see a lot of masks. I suspect a lot of people will be continually cautious. Again, I have concert tickets for a show. I think the first show we have is at the end of September. Obviously, subject to change. It's a smaller venue, and I expect that masks will probably be a good idea. I do wonder, though. It's an interesting one that occurred to me. Is obviously some of these smaller venues that we go to, and the bigger ones for sure. It's not just about the money, it's about the money for the tickets, but the money for the revenue that you bring in for all the booze that you sell and everything else. I wonder if that becomes an issue, because they won't be able to sell, a lot of people taking their masks off, having drinks. Obviously, when you drink, you make less good decisions sometimes. So yeah, it will be interesting.
Drink beer through a straw,
Yeah, where's you slide the straw under your mask,
and how do you eat the pizza and stuff like that?
Yeah, exactly. So it's definitely some stuff to be worked out. Again, I think as far as choices go at this point, the one of the big concert venues here in Toronto is that. The amphitheater, which is down, it's right next to the lake shore. It's a sort of a windy space because it's right next to the lake, and air circulates in there pretty well. And I don't know if they're selling out, obviously, the full gamut of tickets. But I'd say as far as a concert venue right now, that's a pretty good one because it's.
But they're not spacing people out though. That's the thing. They're selling.
I don't know if they're spacing people out in the seats, perhaps differently than they are in that open area. Maybe they're selling less space in the open area. They're normally if it fits, for the sake of argument, 1,000 people, maybe they're only selling 500 spaces so that you can spread out a little more. But whether or not, obviously, they're enforcing whether or not you can be, closer together or not. Again, it's a weird thing to be like, we're all at a concert, and it's like, well, I want to stand by the stage. Well, I also want to stand by the stage, but I don't want to stand next to you. It's a weird circumstance, right?
Yeah, I think I've got some tickets for concerts coming up too, and I've already had one cancel because the artist doesn't want to come to Canada. The pair of them actually, they're up there in terms of age, right? 70s and things like that. But they're from the 70s and they're in their 70s. But yeah, I'm a little nervous about like some of these shows, like Genesis at Scotiabank, and I don't know. I kind of would hope that they would space things out, but I guess they got to sell tickets, right?
Yeah. I mean, I guess we'll see how they deal with it as they get closer and closer to being a real thing. Again, it's one thing to be in an outdoor venue; it's a different thing to be in a small indoor venue, and then it's another different thing on top of that to be in a large, crowd of, typically in a large event at an arena in Toronto can be, 20,000 plus. I wonder what they'll do.
Who can say?
Yep.
All right, folks. I think should we wrap it up?
Sounds like a plan.
Okay.
Yeah, you got to go eat your dinner.
The party started here, so it's Saturday night in Woodstock, New Brunswick, and the party is going.
Gotten quiet there now.
Yeah, I think everybody's stuffing their face now.
All right. Yeah, that'd be because they're all chomping away. Okay.
All right, guys.
Talk to you guys.
Good to talk to you. We'll catch up again next week. We're going to figure out sometime next week when we're going to do it, like Thursday or Friday or whatever.
Yep.
Okay. Sounds good.
Talk to you next week.
Bye.
Later.
Yep.
Bye.
Ew, gotta get rid of this old Backstreet Boys t-shirt.
Tell me why.
Because it stinks, boys.
Tell me why.
I've washed it so many times, but the odor won't come out.
Tell me why.
No, you tell me why I can't get rid of this odor.
Have you tried Downy Rinse and Refresh? It doesn't just cover up odors, it helps remove them.
Wow, it worked, guys.
Yeah.
Downy Rinse and Refresh removes more odor in one wash than the leading value detergent in 3 washes. Find it wherever you buy laundry products.